in video from the Tucker Carlson network.
The Kremlin does not give interviews like this because they think this is some sort of well-meaning contribution to international public debate. They give it because they think it's going to be a chance for them to get their propaganda amplified and probably reach another audience that they're not reaching at the moment.
Do you think NATO is worried about this becoming a global war or a nuclear conflict?
At least that's what they're talking about. And they're trying to intimidate their own population with an imaginary Russian threat. This is an obvious fact. And thinking people, not Philistines, but thinking people, analysts, those who are engaged in real politics, just smart people, understand perfectly well that this is a fake. They're trying to fuel the Russian threat.
The threat I think you're referring to is a Russian invasion of Poland, Latvia, expansionist behavior. Can you imagine a scenario where you sent Russian troops to Poland?
Only in one case, if Poland attacks Russia. Why? Because we have no interest in Poland, Latvia, or anywhere else. Why would we do that? We simply don't have any interest. It's just threat-mongering.
I think there may be a perceived bias in the sense that Russia is seen as the aggressor in this conflict. Now, there are lots of lengthy historical reasons for it, and we've seen Mr. Putin using NATO enlargement since the end of the Cold War to justify that.
Do you think it's too humiliating at this point for NATO to accept Russian control of what was 2 years ago Ukrainian territory?
Up until now, there has been the uproar and screaming about inflicting a strategic defeat on Russia on the battlefield. Now they are apparently coming to realize that it is difficult to achieve, if possible at all. In my opinion, it is impossible by definition. It is never going to happen. It seems to me that now, those who are in power in the West have come to realize this as well. If so, if the realization has set in, they have to think what to do next. We are ready for this dialogue.
It was Russia's decision to send troops into Ukraine with the hope of conquering it. That's failed already. We've seen that for 2 years. And if failing that, to hold on to large swathes of its territory.
So I just want to make sure I'm not misunderstanding what you're saying. I don't think that I am. I think you're saying you want a negotiated settlement to what's happening in Ukraine.
Right. And we made it. We prepared a huge document in Istanbul that was initialed by the head of the Ukrainian delegation. He affixed his signature to some of the provisions, not to all of it. He put his signature and then he himself said, we were ready to sign it and the war would have been over long ago, 18 months ago. However, Prime Minister Johnson came, talked us out of it, and we missed that chance. Well, now let them think how to reverse the situation. We're not against it. It would be funny if it were not so sad. This endless mobilization in Ukraine, the hysteria, the domestic problems, sooner or later it will result in agreement. You know, this probably sounds strange given the current situation. But the relations between the two peoples will be rebuilt anyway. It will take a lot of time, but they will heal.
It was only within a week of the war starting, of course, we saw that infamous legislation that said that, spreading false information about the special military operation, you're still not really allowed to call it a war in Russia. Spreading false information, that means non-official information about the special military operation, as the Kremlin termed it, could land you eventually with up to 15 years in jail. The big consequence of that, of course, is that many international news organizations, if they haven't left Russia already, altogether, they have significantly reduced the number of staff that they've got there. We've seen the infamous case of the Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich, who's been detained for almost a year now, awaiting trial on espionage charges, which of course he and his organization vehemently deny. But it's a very, very difficult place. In effect, it is impossible to practice independent journalism there.
Мы столько сделали жестов доброй воли, что, мне кажется, мы исчерпали все лимиты.
We have done so many gestures of goodwill out of decency that I think we have run out of them.
Ни разу не ответил. Но
we have never seen anyone reciprocate to us in a similar manner. However, in theory, we can say that we do not rule out that we can do that if our partners take reciprocal steps. I do not rule out that the person you refer to, Mr. Gershkovich, may return to his motherland. By the end of the day, it does not make any sense to keep him in prison in Russia. We want the U.S. Special Services to think about how they can contribute to achieving the goals our special services are pursuing. We are ready to talk. Moreover, the talks are underway. And there have been many successful examples of these talks crowned with success. Probably this is going to be crowned with success as well. But we have to come to an agreement.
Given the Biden administration's extensive support for Ukraine, one would imagine that the Kremlin is looking at the upcoming US election and thinking, well, any change is probably better than this. Of course, during his previous term, Mr. Trump was criticized for being very soft on Vladimir Putin. There was a summit meeting they had in Finland in 2018 at which, there was already big discussions. This was not long after the Salisbury poisonings, and Trump was seen as having been very soft on Putin in that meeting when it took place. So I think that, the Kremlin will probably, in some extent, be hoping for a renewed Trump presidency. There's another way of looking at this, though. Vladimir Putin and his administration hate unpredictability. And I think Mr. Trump's foreign policy certainly can in some ways be seen as unpredictable. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. Whether Ukraine and whether American policy towards Russia is going to be a massive issue in the US election remains to be seen, but it is going to be an issue.
One of our senior United States senators from the state of New York, Chuck Schumer, said yesterday, I believe, that we have to continue to fund the Ukrainian effort or US soldiers, citizens could wind up fighting there. How do you assess that?
Well, if somebody has the desire to send regular troops, that would certainly bring humanity to the brink of very serious global conflict. This is obvious. Do the United States need this? What for? Thousands of miles away from your national territory. Don't you have anything better to do? You have issues on the border, issues with migration, issues with the national debt, more than $33 trillion. You have nothing better to do, so you should fight in Ukraine? Wouldn't it be better to negotiate with Russia, make an agreement, already understanding the situation that is developing today, realizing that Russia will fight for its interests to the end? And realizing this, actually return to common sense, start respecting our country and its interests, and look for certain solutions. It seems to me that this is much smarter and more rational. The question is, do they want it or not? Further on, President of Ukraine issued a decree prohibiting negotiations with us. Let him cancel that decree, and that's it.